Hey guys, man oh man, don't I have a treat for you.
It was like a big wake-up call. Like Lisa was kind of scarred by the incident. Yeah, and it was. I mean, it was. We still.
It's like they're just really.
We're ready.
Cool. So I'm Todd Martin. I'm the Grassroots Outreach Coordinator at the Natural Resources Council of Maine. NRCM is celebrating its 60th anniversary this year as an organization. We were founded in 1959 to protect the Allagash River from a major dam that was proposed to be built there, and we helped in the campaign during the 60s to establish the Allagash Wilderness Waterway. So that was 60 years ago, and today we're still fighting for Maine's environment. We're an environmental policy organization, so we focus on passing laws and policies that protect Maine's environment and defeating bills and programs that would roll back protections for Maine's environment. We work on a broad spectrum of issues, from fighting climate change here in Maine and bringing in more clean energy, protecting Maine's North Woods from overdevelopment, removing old dams from rivers and restoring fish passage to our streams and rivers, and working with Maine towns to be more sustainable, to reduce plastic pollution, start composting projects. So that's what we do.
Awesome, thank you.
Hiking gurus, as I call them, to share some inspiring stories from hiking here in Maine. First, I wanted to thank the event sponsors, the Woods+Waters Gear Exchange, for hosting us. Thank you very much for having us. Do you want to say anything about the store?
Yeah, just a couple things. Thanks, guys, for coming. I am Jenna. I own this place, and it's been fun. I've been open since January. Everything's on consignment, all outdoor focused. Just started accepting winter, so if anyone wants to consign some winter gear, bring it on in. And just if you guys need it, there is a bathroom around that little corner to the left, to the right of the bivvy. And yeah, and that's about it. Thanks, guys, for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Also, thanks to Green Tea Soda for donating a whole case of soda, which is pretty great. You guys, looks like we can all go home with a couple bottles of soda at the end of this. Thanks to Flight Deck Brewing also for donating beer. Looks like we can all go home with a beer or two after as well.
Dibs.
Thanks to Wildflowers for donating the goodies, and Wild Oats Bakery for donating a $25 raffle card. And we have an open application right now to join the NRCM Rising Leadership Team. So if you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s and want to help us put on this programming, you can apply between now and November 1st. All right, so that gets us to our first presenter. Oreo will be presenting today. So Aislinn Sarnacki is an outdoor writer for the Bangor Daily News. She also is the author of 3 books about hiking in Maine, including with her dog Oreo. And so Aislinn is here to talk about inspiring stories from hiking around Acadia and other beautiful places in Maine.
Cool. What do I do?
So just that one. This is the next slide.
Cool. Great. So I, like you said, I write for the Bangor Daily News, and I've been there for the past almost 10 years, I guess, or over 10 years, oh God. And I've been writing for the outdoors off and on throughout that time, and including a hiking column. And I hike year-round, so you'll see that in some of the slides. I didn't know that I was going to be getting into hiking year-round when I started, which is silly because I started the column in November. So I quickly learned how to enjoy winter hiking. All right, so I wanted to highlight a couple of places that I really enjoy hiking. With my job is to cover the whole state of Maine, and then in writing my books, again, Down East wanted me to cover the entire state, so I've really been all over the place. I go to a different trail every single week, with a little bit of a hiatus in there, but if you do the math, it's well over 300 different hikes throughout the state, so it was really tough for me to pick ones for this presentation. But I live near Bangor, in a town called Dedham, and that is going towards Acadia National Park. So to get to Acadia, it's about I don't know, 45, 50 minutes. Not too bad. It seems close because Maine is such a big state, right? So that's close for Maine. And so some of my favorite places to hike are in Acadia, but also I wanted to talk about Acadia's mainland portion, which is in Winter Harbor on Schoodic Peninsula. So Acadia itself, I don't know if you know, my number one tip if you're going to go hiking in Acadia is to get a very nice trail map and carry it with you, because there's nothing like getting frustrated on Acadia trails. So Schoodic Peninsula is one of the lesser known, lesser visited spots in Acadia National Park. Most people go to Mount Desert Island, where there's a ton of different mountains, but Schoodic Peninsula is staying on the mainland, and if you continue east, it's in the town of Winter Harbor. And I've done all the trails there. There aren't a ton of them yet, but there's a beautiful campground that they opened up in 2015. And there's Schoodic Head, which rises 440 feet above sea level and has 4 interconnecting hiking trails. And then there's Butt Cove Mountain, which is a little bit inland of that. It's a little bit smaller, but it's a nice quiet hike, and you can actually snowshoeing. And then there are some like locals in Acadia that snowshoe around, and they know exactly where the trails are, and they'll stomp down the trails so you know where they are. But on this particular mountain, the snowshoer that I was following decided to turn around, so then I lost the trail, and so we just had to make do with turning around early that day, because I had no idea where I was going. So that happens. And a beautiful picture of a Bates cairn. So this is an iconic trail marker for Acadia National Park, and don't mess with it, is basically all I wanted to say with that. Don't mess with the cairns.
Is it named after someone?
Yes, Waldron Bates, one of the trailblazers in Acadia National Park. I'm hoping that's correct in my memory. And actually the top little rock up there is a directional rock, so it is very specifically pointed in the direction of the trail. And people like to touch cairns, people like to dismantle them and move them around and do all sorts of weird stuff which can confuse people on trails. So you'll see throughout Acadia there's signs that say don't touch the cairns. And that is the work of Charlie Jacoby for hiking trails in general, is to go to the Maine Land Trust Network and look at land trusts there. If you're looking for, easy preserves and things near your home, you can search land trusts by county, you can search it by alphabetical order. I don't know why you do that, but yeah, so that can be really helpful. And if you're interested in my column at all, I do a written column and then I do videos, so it's a whole production. And they're kind of fun. Then you can go to BangorDailyNews.com, and I actually have my own brand new spanking new section that came out 2 weeks ago. So it's called Act Out, and it's its own page, and it's a play on words, be active outdoors, essentially. And you can check out everything right there. It used to be a blog, so we're kind of transferring everything over to the Bangor Daily News, and I'm going to be doing it full time and trying to get contributing writers and photographers and that sort of thing. So it's my new project.
Ryan actually helps us put together cool NRCM Rising events. He's also a thru-hiker of the Appalachian Trail. You've also hiked the PCT, right? Yes. So he's hiked everywhere. So he is hiking guru. So Ryan.
All right. Let's see. What am I doing first? So, oh, right. See, it works. Oh. Oh.
I just put that random picture in there.
Okay, yeah. I was like, I didn't put that picture in there. Yeah. I spend a bunch of time on the Appalachian Trail, or used to, less time nowadays, but yeah, I grew up in Maine, and when I hiked the Appalachian Trail, this isn't from when I thru-hiked, but that was the first time I had climbed Katahdin, and it was one of those times when I was like, oh yeah, Maine is really friggin' awesome. And so I've done everything I can since. From the backside, or what I call the backside, the front side being coming from Kingfield. So Mount Abraham is one of Maine's 14 4,000-foot peaks. It is also the second largest alpine zone in Maine. So If you want like really big open views, it's the place to go. Katahdin is the other one, so this one's a little more accessible because you can just roll up there and not really have to worry.
Like bars.
Yeah, also, I tend to only hike it in the off season too, so usually there are no leaves on the trees, but there's no snow. You can hike it in the winter, I think, but I've never done it. The road access to Mount Abraham is not great. Yeah, you know.
The bridge is out when I went.
Yeah, so I picked up both of the trails over the summit as a volunteer maintainer several years ago, and the first time I went up as a maintainer, the bridges were out, so I had to ford two streams after a like 2-inch rain the night before, and it was a rough day. But yeah, so this is part of the view from the summit. And there's a campsite at the bottom of the steep part on the Kingfield side. So I also make an app mostly for through hikers of long distance trails called Gut Hook Guides. So if you've been on the Appalachian Trail or Pacific Crest Trail in the past few years, you might have seen people using it. But basically, for a while, I was also just throwing in random places that I really liked hiking back home so that I could use it on my own in places that I enjoy. So I did put Donnell Pond in there, and Mount Abraham is in there also off of the Appalachian Trail. So that is helpful, although it's also nice to have the BPL map from their website.
How long did it take you to do the PCP?
5-ish months, I think. Yeah, that's coming up on 10 years ago, I think. So it's been a while. Things were very different back then. That was before Wild, and before the many, many years of drought in California. Relatively done with now.
I guess actually kind of a thank you for adding in the Grafton Loop Notch into your app.
Oh yeah.
Because honestly, I would have been lost out there like 2 weeks ago had it not been for your app.
I was just out there like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. After Old Spec getting up to the top of Whitecap, there's no signs over there on Sunday River Whitecap, so I actually had to wait up on top of there at like 9:30 at night waiting for my buddy because he didn't have a GPS.
It's funny also, I was waiting there for my buddy because he had a bum knee. Yeah, that would have been another place I would have put in here as a great place to hike in Maine. It's one of those like, it's a real gem like for a weekend backpacking trip. Like how many places can you go and do like a 3 or 4 day loop?
That's cool. So people like leave comments for other people. Like this outhouse is really bad. Like,
yes. You've been on it.
See?
Yeah.
What do they call it? Code Brown.
Yeah.
Actually, I was going to ask you about a trail that I found out because of you from VDN. Actually, the Cutler Coast Trail.
Yes, I put that in there a few years ago too.
You did?
Yes.
Okay, because I was out there like a couple of months ago. I was actually looking on the app. I couldn't find it, but I'll give it a second look.
It's not as easy
also
to
just
find
like
as it should
the
be.
rerouting part of it, which to my like, you know, this happens with your app, and this happens with. I put it in my book, and I had to call up, and he's like, "Yeah, we added like 3 more campsites, and like we rerouted part of it because of a beaver, and, like all this stuff." So things change too, and then you have to update your stuff.
Yeah, actually, they were doing a lot of trail maintenance out there when I was there. We couldn't actually take the inland track back because it was too overgrown.
Yeah.
Some of the bridges were being replaced, which was amazing. Going through the field right by these beautiful cliffs and just waterfalls coming out of them, and yeah, it was just an amazing hike.
Oh, cool.
So I think this also ties into things that NRCM does, which is advocating a lot for Land for Maine's future.
So our last speaker for the evening is Megan Thompson. Megan is also an Appalachian Trail thru-hiker, and she has a podcast as well called Stories from the Trail. So
It's my trail name. Ryan's is Gut Hook. I'm not sure if he actually said that. There was a lot of snow and ice. We didn't just call Ryan and say, hey, where's a place? And this is exactly my criteria. If you don't have a human to do that for you, I think Maine Trail Finder works really well. Yeah, so this is from the top of Old Spec. Old Spec is a 4,000 footer. So if you're going through and trying to knock those all off, it's one of the best ones. There's this little Eyebrow loop trail when you're going up Old Spec via the AT. It's basically an equidistant. Like it meets you at the base, and if you took the AT up or if you took this up, it's about the same distance, but it has some really, really nice views, and for some reason, a lot of people don't use it. I don't know why, but it's awesome. This isn't from that. This is from the watchtower at the top of Old Spec, and the view up there is obviously, it's amazing. And I have a few pictures from the AT because I do want to talk about that a bit. So these pictures are from the Appalachian Trail in Maine, and if I can kind of get a little bit, there's 267 miles on the Appalachian Trail in Maine to explore. And since it's like my favorite spot, obviously, it was my favorite hike I've ever done. I love going back and hiking small sections. And there's so many different sections that are accessible, even in the 100-mile wilderness, which, there's a road that goes right through it. So if you have an all-wheel drive vehicle or, you pay the toll, you can go out there. Actually, you probably don't even need all-wheel drive because the road is maintained pretty well. But the Appalachian Trail has some really, really awesome hikes. One of the great things about Gut Hook's app is the elevation profile. So if you're not into really, really, really big 4,000 footers, the Appalachian Trail in Maine and a lot of the other hikes in Maine don't have a lot of those really big mountains because not everybody wants to go out and hike a 4,000 footer every time. But my goal whenever I go for an overnight is always to see a sunset, or a sunrise. One of those.
Yeah, there you go.
Northern end of 100 Mile. I don't remember that because I was night hiking. So I probably hiked this at night and I did not see it. But I want to talk a little bit about thru-hiking because I think that's part of the reason I was brought here. So this is one of my favorite photos from my thru-hike. And the reason is because you can't see my friend over there, but that's me in the center, and it was taken by my very good friend Gary, Green Giant. And this is Blue Indian, and Droid is over there. But the reason I included this photo is because the AT is really, it's all about the people.
You go about
getting
into it.
Yeah, so this is good. Okay, this is probably the best place to start. So I hiked when I was younger. My parents are really outdoorsy. I'm from Maine. I never really went backpacking or camping. I didn't even know much about the Appalachian Trail. I knew it was a thing, didn't have any interest in doing it whatsoever, hadn't really ever considered it until a friend told me, hey, I'm graduating soon, do you want to go either backpack in Asia or hike the Appalachian Trail? And I said, ooh, that's tough, let me think about that. And then his graduation was delayed, and he's like, but you should still do this. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail now. So I found used gear, I found less expensive stuff, I tried to acquire the things that I needed based on some of the stuff I figured from these lists, but I ended up being completely underprepared. And that's okay when you're a person who can adapt to that. I mean, I had enough stuff. The problem is I had way too much. I was overprepared and underprepared at the same time because my body didn't know how to carry the massive amount of weight. And I also thought I needed everything, but I also couldn't find anything that I needed because my bag was so full. So my life for the first 3 weeks was getting to campsite, dumping out my entire backpack, and sifting through bags and bags and bags of things. But it's one of those things where it's more of a mental game. So I was willing to do that. I figured out how to stay positive through all the crap, but sometimes people don't.
Tell us about your podcast.
So my podcast is called Stories from the Trail. We're on a brief hiatus right now. I do it with that guy right there, Gary, Green Giant. He wrote a few books after the trail and kind of had a little bit of a social media following, and from that he wants to do a podcast and dragged me onto it. We like to interview people who are involved in the outdoor community or who are active or just do different things. We interviewed
gear specialists, people who specialize in footwear, people who just know a lot about certain areas. We interviewed Ryan Guthook, that's how I met him. Thank you for introducing me to all my friends in Portland, because when I moved back to Portland from New Hampshire, I didn't know anybody except for him. It was kind of convenient, so the podcast actually does connect people. What do you know? Generally like to ask people at the end of every show if it doesn't already come up. And Ryan, do you remember what that question is? Oh, I was gonna have you help me here. The question, there's a topic that always comes up in hiking, and there's no two ways around it. You want to guess?
What's your best poop story?
Yes. What's your best poop story? You must have listened to the podcast.
Oh, I actually do.
Oh, you do? Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we say at the end. If it hasn't already come up, and chances are it comes up before we get to the end of the show. I think we've only had to ask people like 3 times in all of our 50-something episodes, what's your best poop story? Because every hiker has a poop story. And I think it kind of makes us all remember that we're human. We're all out there struggling with the same things.
What's your favorite poop story?
Mine, well, the one that I think I've told on the podcast happened right outside of Damascus, Virginia, at a shelter. It was a rainy day. And we were like so excited we were getting to Damascus. It's a big deal to make it to Damascus. It's kind of it's a mental stopping point, I guess, if you will. It's a mental accomplishment to get there. And we were going to be hiking the next morning. It was raining. Everyone was packed in this shelter. Not a big deal. We've all done it before. And at like 6 o'clock in the morning, I get out of the shelter to go pee, do my morning thing, start my routine, and it's still pouring, so I'm like trying to inch my way around the shelter, and my foot slips, and I kind of do a little bit of a split. I'm like, what is that? And I was like, oh, there was someone's dog pooped right next to the shelter, and I went to go clean off my crock and realized soon after it was not dog feces, it was human feces.
Oh.
So I had a nickname for a very brief period of time, a crock of shit, because I stepped into human fecal matter with a crock. And needless to say, those crocks were on the outside of my pack until we got to Damascus and then went in a trash can. Because there's no way you're washing that off. I mean, you can wash it off, but you can never wash off the memory of stepping into human feces. That's kind of with you for life. So that's my favorite poop story. Least or worst. So. Anything else? We can end on poop too.
I'm just really curious about through hiking seems like obviously it's really challenging physically, but I'm really interested in like the mental aspect, because I remember I went out and I wanted to just stay one overnight in the woods by myself, and I did it. It was challenging though for me. Like I think a lot of people, like you don't grow up doing those sorts of things by yourself in the woods in a tent by yourself. You did it by yourself, but you had met friends along?
Yeah, so I went out by myself with the intention to do it by myself. But there were so many people, even though I started what's considered late, there were still a lot of people out there, so I was meeting people along the way. But my plan every day, that was all my own until I started hiking with a group. But my scariest night on the AT was my first night. And I wasn't even actually on the AT. I was camping out before going to Springer Mountain to start my Thru-hike, and that was the scariest I've ever been. I slept for maybe 3 hours. Every single thing that went bump the night was terrifying. I was legitimately afraid of the dark before I Thru-hiked the AT. Like I know as adults it's like kind of taboo to be like afraid of the dark because kids are afraid of the dark, but I mean, who's not afraid of walking out in the middle of the woods it's not your backyard, it's some random place in the middle of the woods, you're alone. You're nowhere near a road or other people. You don't know who else is out there. That's terrifying. That's not. Yeah, like there are things happening outside in the wild that you don't know what's going on. There are bears. It's a terrifying thing, and I was legitimately afraid of the dark. But that was, where are we going with this? I'm sorry.
How did you get through it then?
How to get through it?
Especially if it was like the first night. Like,
what's that? Desensitization therapy? Just like diving in.
Exposure therapy.
Exposure. Thank you. That's the clinical term for it. Yeah, I needed a psychologist to help me out with that. But exposure therapy, was kind of talking myself through it. We're lucky as humans, we have the ability, unlike like dogs, they can't talk themselves out of being scared, but we as humans have the ability to talk ourselves out of that. So it was a matter of constantly telling myself, like, this is okay, just breathe through it, get through it, like when I was scared of the dark, or when it was like a really bad day. Everyone says don't quit on a bad day, which is totally true, but on the AT you could have like 13 bad days in a row and not quit after that. So I try to, and I keep this with me in everything I do now, I try to find these small positives in every single little thing. And when I first went out there, it was a struggle to do that, because I, in my everyday life before going on the AT, didn't know how to do that. I was a clinical perfectionist, and I was constantly putting pressure on myself to achieve things and do things, and berating myself for not succeeding. And how I put myself out there on this trek where I've got one ultimate goal, how am I going to not do that? And so I started with that, and then slowly tried to just see the positives and then encourage myself. A lot of positive self-talk, learned through years of therapy, helped me with that, because otherwise how are you going to like struggle through all that stuff? There's gonna be days when you absolutely hate everything, you miss your family, you haven't seen people in days, or maybe you've seen one person and that's just like the most annoying hiker you've ever met, and they're the only one hiking near you, they're your only social contact, but you still have to stay sane. So my thing was just find the small positives, and I do that now too. That's kind of what keeps me sane now. Just when things are shit, just find one small positive thing and just hold on to it.
Crocs when you found it.
What's that?
Right. That you weren't wearing Crocs when you found it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Maybe before we wrap up. Traveling down how'd you get from here to Georgia?
My parents bought me a one-way ticket as a graduation present to Atlanta, and I have family in Atlanta, so I was very lucky. I had family to pick me up at the airport and keep me there for a few days, and then drive me to Springer Mountain. But there are a bunch of shuttle services right now and hostels where you can stay, specifically for thru-hikers, and they'll bus you out there. So there's a lot of people along the trail that are helping out in some capacity, and all of that's on, basically, you can find it online. Everything's online now.
Aside from like the scared of the dark thing, did you ever feel like scared, like it didn't happen on the trail that like made you afraid, like of another person, or? There was
one person I met in my first week that I was kind of terrified to be around. He just didn't seem like a thru-hiker, just had a vibe about him that just felt violent. I mean, it could have been that he was sharpening a machete, but he was obviously not a thru-hiker. He had a very friendly dog, but he knew that I was setting up. He's like, ooh, you're gonna set up your tent here? Oh, awesome. Let's like have a fire tonight. And I was like, I don't really want to be around this. So I made an excuse. I didn't set my tent up, went to a water source, which was fortunately away from the campsite, and then just bailed and hiked another, I think, 5 miles to find a campsite where I felt safe, because I would rather be alone in the middle of the woods and be with a sketchy person in the middle of the woods. And honestly, he could have been harmless, but
he could have been that guy.
But he also could have been that guy. Like, yeah. You never know. And as a single female hiking, I'm gonna take all precautions, and trust my gut. If something feels a little off, I'm gonna find someplace else to be. So.
Awesome. Thank you very much for sharing your story. Thanks to all 3 of our speakers this evening.